Hear me okay? I'll just talk. So thanks for coming. There's some cookies over there, some waters if you'd like. Help yourself. I haven't had a lot of town halls. I've been spending a lot of my time calling personally. I've called all the delegates, some that I haven't got a hold of. If I didn't get a hold of you, I hope I left you a message. But I've spent days, actually a couple weeks calling, and it's been a fun thing to get to know everybody and get ready for the. How many of you are county delegates in here? Are you all county delegates? Everybody, awesome. I've been involved in this process for a long time, and it's a great thing to be able to. How many of you are first-time delegates? Several. And that's what I found calling delegates is many of them are brand new. They've never experienced this, but they're excited to be involved in their county and country and have a say in what happens. And so it's really a neat process where you can vet the candidates and find out about them. I'll just introduce myself a little bit. I grew up in Moab. My folks moved there in the 50s. I was born in 62 and grew up in a home that believed in hard work. And I come from a family of 7, 5 sisters and a brother. And I graduated in 1980, came to Cedar City to go to what was SUSC at the time. Of course, now it's SUU, but came here, went to a year of school. I came to school with $50 in my pocket and a half tuition scholarship and hoped I could find a job. And I did. I found a job at Glades Mill and Fixture Company down 800 West, building cabinets. That's what I did in Moab. I worked for my shop teacher over there. And so I got a job there. All I could afford was a motorcycle, so I rode that year round. Snow, wind, whatever. It was interesting. I worked full time and went to school full time. So many nights I worked till midnight and rode home with my feet down, hoping I wouldn't crash on the ice. And it was wild, but that's all I could afford. And it was welcome. Thanks for coming. But I did a year of school. I then served a mission for my church in Australia. That was a great experience. Came back home, and I came back home, went to work for the same company I was working for before, and met my wife in that time, and my beautiful wife, and got married. And then we started our cabinet shop in 1987, and that was about, 5 years ago. And it's been a great business. We've actually since sold that shop. When I was elected as a county commissioner this last time, about 3.5 years ago, I sold the business to my son, and he's carrying that on now. I'm still involved in the shop. I spend probably an hour or 2 a week measuring jobs for him, and that's been enjoyable to, and I'll never not be involved with my son because his success is mine, and I'm real proud of him, and he does a great job. So we started our shop in '87. And it's just been a great ride. We've done a lot of, hello Donnie. We've done a lot of work, about a 300-mile radius with cabinet work. Spent a lot of time, night and day, running. You guys, I don't know how many of you run your own business, but it's a challenge. You spend a lot of hours. But my wife and I have 3 sons, 3 biological sons. And then we adopted 2 daughters from China. And we went to China 19 years ago and brought home a beautiful little baby, 8 months old, and her name's Brinley. And she's been just a joy, and she's getting ready to go on a mission. And then we thought she's gonna be kind of lonely, so we went back to China and adopted another little girl. She was 4.5, and she didn't want to come home with us. She was pretty mad when we went to pick her up, but she's happy now. But she was born without a left arm. And at the time, to adopt a baby from China, it was hard to go through. Before it was like 18 months to get a baby, and this time it was like 5 years. And so if we were willing to take a baby that had some special needs, we could get one faster. And so we found Brooklyn, and she was missing the arm, but she does great. We brought her home, and the first thing she said is, I want to play the violin like my sister. And because Brinley was a very good violinist, I said, honey, you only have one arm. Donnie's laughing. So we thought, well, we started researching things a little bit, and my daughter's very good friends with his granddaughter. They're both Chinese. She's adopted too. But anyway, we took her up to Shriners Hospital. They're wonderful. They made her a prosthetic arm. It's got an attachment for dance. She's dancing right now in the next room. And she's got an attachment to hook a bow on her hand. So we flip the strings over on her violin so she plays backward, right? And she plays and she does really good. It's really fun. And so all three of my boys are married. I've got 2 grandkids. And anyway, that's a little bit about me. So, and I get really dry mouth when I talk, so I'm going to take a drink of water. And I'll talk about anything you guys want to talk about tonight. I wanted to maybe just touch on my platform. And this is really the platform I served. So 10 years ago, I was running for the Cedar City Council. This valley was headed down the road to the Lake Powell pipeline. They were pushing pretty hard for that. And it really worried me because it was about, at the time, that was back in 2011, and it was estimated to cost about $450 million to bring the water up the hill, and about $10 million a year in power cost to pump it up the hill. And that was from Quail Creek, and it was for 11,000 acre-feet of water. And we did the math, and I just felt like that would bankrupt our valley in the city. There's no way we could have paid for that. And if you amortize the $450 million over 50 years, which is the life of the project, it would have cost this valley $1 billion. And it doesn't make sense. So I ran partly on that platform as to get out of Lake Powell pipeline, and we did. There was 2 other city councilmen that ran that year. There was 13 of us, and the 3 of us were kind of pushing that theme, and we got out of that. But after we did that, I always felt obligated to find other solutions for water in this valley. And so I was appointed to the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District Board. And that board, and Tyler Melling, Councilman Melling, is on that board back here. And their duty is to look out for 50 years and make sure we have water 50 years from now. And it was interesting. We went on a field trip back then. I think it was about 2013. We actually went down to Arizona and toured what they called the Central. Hello, Tom. Toured what they called the Central Arizona Project, and that was fascinating because they actually lift. So before the Colorado River, Arizona really couldn't capitalize on the water that they owned. So they built an impeller system where they lifted water 800 feet vertically out of Lake Havasu, and then they would put it down concrete channels through the interior of Arizona, and they were able to, it changed the state. I mean, it made a big difference. But that was done in the 70s. So that was somebody 50 years ago that had the vision of water to create something that, and it was brilliant, and it works, and they were able to use it. So that really opened my eyes. I spent 8 years on the board, and we really took a 3-tiered approach to water in this valley. The first was importing new water into the valley from another basin. The second was conservation, and the third was recharge. And those are the 3 things we continue to work on. There was a lot of, so back before I was put on the board, the water district went out, there was unappropriated water over in Beaver County, over in the Pine Valley. So you have Milford, and then there's Wawa, Pine, and Hamlin Valley. So those are the 3. And if you've ever driven through there, they would engulf our valley. They're huge. And so we went out there. There's some old wells out there, some Dalton wells. We went out, I actually took my cutting torch with the board. We cut the caps off those wells, put cameras down. We pump tested those. And we've determined through studies, the environmental impact statement study. Is it statement, Tyler, or is it study? EIS? EIS, is it study or statement? Statement. And anyway, we're going through that right now. It's in review. And originally we filed on 12,000 acre feet in Wawa, 15,000 in Pine, and 10 in Hamlin. And we were awarded the water in Wawa and Pine Valley, 15,000 acre feet in Wawa, or in Pine Valley, and we were awarded, I think it was 6,250 acre feet in Wawa. And what it is, you'll see a lot of stuff in the news. There's environmentalist groups that have gotten involved. that aren't really being truthful. This environmental impact study, they do a modeling system where they'll model this, and these valleys have what they call safe yields. So that's whatever Mother Nature puts in the ground through snow, rain, whatever. That's whatever Mother Nature puts in the aquifer. That's how much you can pull out. So it's like a bank account. If you take out more water out of your bank account than you put in, you're going to go broke, and that's our problem right now. In the Cedar Valley, our safe yield is 21,000 acre feet, and we're using 28. So we're going in the hole. We're going in the hole about 7,000 acre feet a year, and that's a problem. And so, you have a question?
So, what you're saying is that because we're growing as a valley,
Mm-hmm.
That's going to increase our output need.
Mm-hmm.
How much more?
Well, and that's a good question. Growth is something that people are concerned about, but we did what's called a groundwater management plan. So the state engineer is responsible to make sure these basins are safe, that they have water for those that live here. And so about 5 years ago, I believe, they came down into our valley, and part of the problem was when the soldiers came home from the Second World War, they all wanted to farm, right? They all wanted to do that, and so they were passing out water rights kind of like candy, and they overdid it. They gave too many out. But as they gave those water rights out, they used a system called priority dates. So we have some water in this valley that's, what is it, Tyler, 1890?
1856.
That old, 1850. That's older than I thought. But there's some 1850 water, and it goes clear up to, what, 1960? 63. And so what happens is water rights, you've got a priority. And you'll have a lot of people say, well, gee, the farmers are using 70 to 80% of our water. That's not fair. Well, it is fair because they own it. They were here first, and it's a property right. They own that water, and they have a right to use it. And so, but with the groundwater management plan, I like to use an analogy. It's like a 55-gallon drum, and you have holes all the way around this drum. And just because they come, so what happens is they've determined that the safe yield in this valley is a 1934 priority, water priority. And so let's say on that barrel, the hole's that far up from the bottom of that 55-gallon drum's 1934. Well, as the water drops and the water goes below the hole where your water comes out, you don't get any water. You don't lose your water right, you just don't get any water. And so the groundwater management plan, they basically said, if you don't have 1934 or older water, that you can lose it. And that's how they're managing these basins. And so what's happening now with growth, and people always ask this, is with growth, water is going to control growth. And when Enoch or the water district, the county, the water district, Central Illinois County, that they supply water, if you want to do a subdivision, Karen, you come into the Enoch or the water district and you say, I want to do this subdivision, they're going to make you bring water rights, what is it, Tyler, about a half acre per home? Or less if you do zero-scape and some of those things. But if you'll have to bring enough water to do that development. It has to be prior to 1934, and that's the requirement.
So do they buy it?
They can buy it, or some, and oftentimes it's an alfalfa field that they've been farming, and maybe they're tired of farming and the prices. So just for instance, when I was first on the water board in 2012, we were buying water for $2,500 an acre foot. Last couple weeks ago, I think they just closed on some 1934 older water, $25,000. It's gone up 10 times in 10 years. That's a lot. And so that shows, so it's supply and demand, right? And so, so what's going to happen is that's going to control our growth. And people say, well, let's shut off growth. We can't handle it anymore. Well, that's not really, first of all, we can't legally shut off growth. I mean, the legislature has said that we can do a moratorium for 6 months, but what happens is if you shut off growth, number one, Tom, what is it? Is it about 50% of our community is involved? Mari?
In one way or another.
50% of our economy in this valley is deep, with insurance, with home builders, with suppliers. It's a big part of our economy. I don't believe that shutting off growth is the answer. We've got to figure out a problem. We've got to do some other things, and so that's going to control growth, is whether you have enough water to bring in. And oftentimes it's an alfalfa field. You might be tired of farming. You can make a lot of money by selling your water. A developer will come in and they'll develop that land with that water. And so that, just the supply and demand of that water is going to control growth in this valley. So, Edie?
I was in California, this is years ago, when they converted all landscaping to desert landscaping.
Right.
At that time, they paid you, the owners, to convert to desert landscaping. And yet I see grass growing around here. Even in the HOA where I live, there's grass and it gets watered. Can't the county be more creative and inventive and do a program to get rid of grass?
We passed, so when I was on the water board that Tyler serves on, we passed, so if Karen wants to come in and do her subdivision, and she's willing to require, and I believe I think they had to set up an HOA, I can't remember. Tyler, do you remember? I think they had to set up an HOA, and if you had a percentage of your yard that you were willing to xeriscape and have a tiny bit of lawn, rather than bring in 0.45 acre feet per residence, you could do like 0.35. So and that was an incentive to developers to do that, Edie. And so that's a good way to incentivize somebody not having to bring so much water, is to have them help.
For new developments, there are older ones, like where I live, I think it's been around for 20 years.
Right.
And yet there's still watering grass.
Right. Well, I'm guilty. I mean, my wife and I built our home 25 years ago, and water wasn't as big a deal back then. And we had a half acre. It's not all grass, but there's a lot of it. We've started taking some of it out and putting gravel in because our kids are grown. And so we don't need that much grass, but it's it's expensive just to do that, to change your sprinklers and put, fabric down and gravel. We're starting to do that with some of our yard.
What about some of the gray water usage laws that they have out there? I mean, we can recycle our own water, but yet they have all these limitations on it. They actually have easy filter systems. It's not that big of a deal to do, yet they demand that we run it back down the drain. And I know they're trying to fill aquifers and do some other things, but at the same time, if I've used that water and it's in my gray water system, for those who don't know what a gray water system is, what you're done when you're showering and that type of thing,
right.
You can recycle that back in. What are your thoughts on some of that, and why are the laws so restrictive in some of our areas for gray water?
Well, they used to restrict capturing rainwater, but they made it legal now. It's legal to do that. I have to confess, I don't know a ton about gray water systems. Maybe you can educate us better than I can. I don't know a lot about it.
When we're done, we can have.
Okay, and you can talk about it now if you want, but
That's state rules, and the state is about 20 years behind the times.
Yeah.
So we need a good lobbyist to.
We really do need to work on it, and matter of fact, we've developed a system.
And in relationship to that, since I was on the board, I think the low-hanging fruit has always been our wastewater treatment effluent. We put out about 3,200 acre feet a year at the sewer plant, and that water it hasn't totally been wasted, but they flood irrigate, and it got so bad. I mean, when I was first on the council, they added about a $13 million nitrate plant to get rid of some, because the nitrates were coming up so high in the groundwater, the State Division of Water Quality were concerned. But right now, there's a lot of ideas on the table to take that effluent, that sewer water, and pipe it to the pivots. And this gets into conservation, where they can pipe it to a farmer's pivot. They can water their alfalfa with it, and they can idle their wells, and that's awesome, and it helps our aquifer, and that's something we've been talking about. And I know Mayor Green that was one of his campaign promises, and he's moving forward on that. He's got some ideas, and we met last night in a meeting and talked about that a little bit.
So we were just a few minutes late. Did you start out with answers, or I'm hearing a lot of information? What's your idea for some answers for some of this? Well water, do we have options? What am I hearing?
So we just, I was talking about water. And they were talking about, you know, in our basin, the priority is 1934 and older, or you can lose it. You can forfeit it. The scary part in our basin is Cedar City, in 50 years, will lose 80% of their water because they don't have a lot of old water. They have some, but not enough.
So what's the solution?
So the solution is the three-tiered approach that we're doing, and that's importing water from another basin, and that's what we're working on. Through the time I was on the water board, we went through a lawsuit with Sitla, Utah Alunite, and Beaver County, and we won that lawsuit. It took a lot of years and a lot of money. That water was filed on years before I was on the board, and it was a battle. But in Utah, Utah water law is first in time, first in right. If you can find water that's unallocated and not being used, you can file on that water. If you can put it to beneficial use, it's yours. And not only did we get the state engineer, excuse me, to approve that, we actually took it to the 5th District Court and a judge signed off on it. And that's as secure as it gets for a water right. So when you hear people say that we're stealing another county's water, it's not true. For everybody in Salt Lake City this morning that took a shower, they probably got their water from 2 counties away. Delta, if you live in Delta and you're watering your hay, you're most likely getting that water off our mountain that goes off the east side down the Sevier River, and I think it goes through 7 counties, at least. And so there's you know, water crosses county lines all the time. And so importing water's a big one to work on. We're going through the EIS, I talked about a little bit. We're going through the environmental impact study, and that's posted online in the Department of Interior. I think it might have closed by now, but they're going to go through and review the comment period and then come out with a final determination. But so importing water, the recharge is something I've been passionate about. I got involved in that when I was on the board. We went out to some of these, the best place to recharge is these gravel pits. We have gravel pits, they've created these great big holes in the ground for 50 years mining gravel. And they're the strata is such that the water will perk easily. One project that I'm real proud of that we did back in 2000, it was about 2017. As you know, where the airplanes come into the airport, where they approach, you know, the lights. If you were to park your car right there, and any of you could do it, but if you park your car right there and walk straight north, you'll see a huge gravel pit that's about 12 acres. And when I was on the city council and on the board, I found some used pipe at the airport that was laying out just, you know, in the sun. It was 33-inch diameter. We dug some trenches, laid that pipe, and we learned a lot. We ran that, first we tried doing it in a ditch, but it eroded so fast. Overnight it looked like the Grand Canyon, so we put the pipe in. We had to do some head walls and some riprap. Anyway, it was trial and error, but we got it done. And the key to recharge is to, some years you have such a bad drought that you don't have water to recharge. But when you do, you want these projects done so you can do it, and that's the key. So in 2018 and 19, we had a 200% snowpack on the mountain, and when that came down, we put 10,000 acre feet in that pit and recharged. So our deficit's 7, and we put in 10. So that's 3,000 in the positive, and that was awesome. And the state will give us credit for that. So rather than come and take our water rights away here, we just move the goalpost down here because we recharged our aquifer. And we have about 7 projects in this valley.
North of the sewer plant, where all that water went coming down Coal Creek, especially when it got all diverted and whatever, the flood.
Right.
Is there any recharging out there where the Coal Creek dead ends?
There's some that'll get into the ground. I mean, naturally it'll perk, you know. So, and it always has. The problem with those monsoonal floods is Paul Monroe he's gone in there when it was going and dipped a cur jar in there, and half of it is dirt when it settles out, and that's the challenge, right? And so one of the projects we worked on, you guys, I don't want to bore you to death. I keep talking if you want, just if you want to change the subject. But so Quichapa, for eons of time, the water has come off Cedar Breaks and gone out to Quichapa, and it's a terminus lake. I think they've estimated there's about 400 feet of clay. And so the water goes out there and it can't perk because it's clay. And so that water would just sit out there and evaporate, and it's just a waste. And so as a board, I think it was a college project. But what we did is we kind of built on that, and we try to capture the water before it gets out there in these gravel pits. There's Kit Wareham, our old city engineer, was kind of the pioneer of recharge. Years ago when Mayor Sherritt was the mayor, all this beautiful, clean winter water was going out to Quichapa and just evaporating. And Kit went to the mayor and said, Mayor, we got to save this water. So when they built the airport, there was these two big basins they dug right parallel with the runways. They used the gravel for the runway and left beautiful, channels for the water. And they started diverting. This has probably been 25 years ago. And they've been diverting the water into those channels, and it perks right in the ground. And that goes right into our aquifer, and it's awesome. So he started that, and then we did the Western Rock project. We did the Schmidt pit over. Phil Schmidt was really great to work with. Western Rock, which is the parent company, Staker Parsons, they're awesome to work with us and let us use their private property to do these things. We've done the Cedar City did the one over by the Locksmith on 56. You guys probably saw the piles of gravel. They dug two great big channels, and so the tailwater from the southwest irrigation field and the runoff from storms goes into those pits or those troughs that are pretty long. So they have a meter in the water going in and a metering the water going out, so they know what goes in the ground. And they've got I know they transmit it with SCADA. What's the other? They have flumes that measures the water. I can't remember the name, but they measure the water going in and coming out. And so we've got that project. And then we've got the Quichapa project. What we did out there is anything we couldn't recharge in the valley, if it made out to Quichapa, we built a diversion structure, so it had a gate that we can raise and lower. If it's a real stormy event with all the high content of mud, we would open the gate and just let it go, because if you try putting that stuff in your gravel pits, it just plugs it off. It fills it with mud, and then it can't soak in the ground anymore. So we would let it go out to Quichapa. But now, last year we built a dike across Quichapa from east to west. And this dike, what we do is we take the dirty water and run it to the south of the dike, but clean water, we'll run it to the north of the dike. And we'll actually take that water and pump it out of Quichapa up to some hay fields that are north of 56. And those farmers will water with that water that would have evaporated, and they idle their wells. And that's better than trying to recharge it. So, Edie?
I really appreciate all this information about water.
Okay.
But the one thing that really concerns me right now is the fentanyl drug trafficking that's going up and down our interstate. I just finished writing an 8-part series at Iron County today on fentanyl drug trafficking. And a lot of people in Cedar, including, not Paul, he knows about it, but including most of the other candidates, federal, state, and local, don't want to talk about the drug trade. That fentanyl is an artificial opioid that you take it once and you die. And because our borders with Mexico, actually from Florida all the way to California, are wide open, in fact, they're going to be more open because our dear president is getting rid of the Title 42 border policy. This is happening in Cedar. People are dying of fentanyl poisoning. I want people to know about it so that you can inform your children and grandchildren, because fentanyl is something that humans cannot detect with any of our senses. A day doesn't go by that our highway patrol troopers don't stop someone who is caught with fentanyl. And they have to use the canine units to detect it. So I've brought information if anyone wants to know about it. Remember, you have grandchildren, you have children. They are not targeting people like me. I'm 80 years old, and I'll die at some point. But they're targeting our young people. And you know, I forgot your name. You know about it, don't you? Because you're in law enforcement.
I'm an attorney, but.
Attorney, district attorney, yeah. Well, I consider that.
Well, we appreciate, Edie, we appreciate you bringing that up. And I was going to talk about that, I promise, but you beat me to it. But, you know, one thing that we do is we you know, our county attorney's office is very aware of this. We try to give them the funding and the resources to prosecute these cases. You know, I know our sheriff's department, I was talking to Dan a little before the meeting today, and he was, you know, and you've talked about this in articles a little bit, but the naloxone, and some of those things. I know you've said that some of those things don't. Once you get so much, it's over. But
You get one
yeah,
time.
Dan will argue with you a little bit because I told him what you said, and he said that sometimes it'll help you.
But
But
there is, I do, before I give this up, back to you, there is now a test kit to test whether fentanyl is in a substance. Some municipalities, including Albuquerque and some others in California, are giving the test kit away free.
yep.
And I just don't see why Iron County can't do something like that, because there are people here dying of fentanyl poisoning.
Right.
It's not just affecting other states, it's affecting Utah and Iron County.
When I was first elected, we had a training on the fentanyl, and it doesn't take much to kill you. It's a
No.
scary drug, and the Chinese version of it is bad news. We appreciate your articles. I've read them. They're very enlightening. I think we just need to be aware, teach our kids and grandkids to be aware. Logistically, I know there's testing kits, and we've talked about this. It seems what do you test? I mean,
Well,
it seems.
in California, my granddaughter is going to law school in Berkeley Law School, and they give the test kit away
Mhm.
at the student union.
Right. Okay.
Now, you can't just say, oh, this had never happened to my kids, they would never take drugs.
Yep.
They don't have to be taking drugs to be killed from fentanyl.
Yep. Well, thank you. Thanks, Edie. Appreciate you
So-
bringing that
The
up.
good news is you can get naloxone free
Mhm.
through UtahNaloxone.org. They'll send you 3 doses of that every year. I have 2 doses in the truck right now.
Mhm.
And that will work for fentanyl, that will work for any opioid. It counteracts it immediately, and if it's not an opioid, there's no interaction with the drug whatsoever.
Good. Well,
So
thank you.
It's a really great thing to have.
Well-
And also, county first responders are provided Narcan.
But it's
and-
not just Narcan, there's one other test now.
Well, this is a treatment. This is
Oh, after someone's taken.
after somebody's been
If you
in
get
contact.
it to them fast enough.
Yeah, you have about 5-10 minutes, and you'll notice.
Well, Edie, if you want to leave some of your stuff on the table, thank you. Appreciate you bringing that
But
up.
it's going to
So,
get worse because the title, what is it called? Title 42 is being eliminated as a border.
Well, until we elect a president-
And the Democrat senators
Yeah.
are concerned.
until we elect a president that cares about the borders and have them open, it's going to be
We
tough.
have to care about what's coming
I agree,
from the
Edie.
border.
But until we get a president that will be concerned about the border too, that's a challenge. So I want to go back, finish the water stuff. We talked about importing water from the West Desert, talked about recharge. The other thing is conservation. Now, I'd mentioned that agriculture uses about 80% of the water in the valley. It's their right. They own it first. And when they want to sell their water and develop, then that's their choice. But let me finish my point real quick, and then I'll come back to you. So years ago, we've gotten some grants from the state. They have a system called the Lipa System. You guys have seen pivots that have the nozzles up here, and they spray a fine mist, and the wind's blowing. It's hot. You lose some of that water to drift and evaporation. So what they've done is they call it and those drops on the pivots are 90 inches apart. So what they do is they come in and retrofit those pivots, and they put 2 drops between the 90-inch, and it does 30-inch between them, and they bring it down to about a foot off the ground, and they put more of a bubbler action, so it's a bigger droplet of water. And I went out to Baker, Nevada. There's a guy out there named Tom Baker. All of his pivots are like this. he said, I guarantee it saves at least 10%, and I think maybe as high as 20%. So if you multiply 28,000 acre feet times 80%, and then multiply that by 20%, or 15 or 10, that's a big number. If you save 20%, I think it's about 3,600 acre feet you're saving. And so where our deficit's 7, and you can conserve with ag, you are saving a lot of water. And so all of these things add up, and you know, we can solve our water problems. And
Real quick.
sure, Tom.
So Edie is talking about the, like, just individual homes with grass. But honestly, I mean, the city and county just watering schools and soccer fields and everything, it's gotta be 100 times more than everybody with their little lawns. Now, I'm not saying I want them gone.
Right.
And the runoff on there, and how much control do you have over, like, just the guys that are running the fields?
We hear a lot of complaints about people on social media come out and say, counties, the cities, you know, the college are all hypocrites because they tell us not to water it during the day, and they do. The reason for that is when we have a storm, you know where the new car wash down here where Mr. Bubbles was, it's now the Tag and Go. They have a pump station there, and all the water goes into that pump station. It pumps up to the lake on the hill. And then these secondary water systems comes from that lake. And so the reason they've watered during the day is they don't have enough time slots to water everything. So they're watering 24 hours a day, and sometimes they have to water during the day to use that secondary water. And that's the reason, right? Some don't know that.
You have a lot less,
Yeah,
complaining.
and every time somebody says that, I usually try to answer that
It does
question.
make you think about, I mean, because if
It
you
does.
drive by and you see, well, why are
It-
they
yes.
complaining about my lawn?
Yeah, but they are using secondary water, but to get through the rotation, by the time they all get through the rotation, they're kind of forced to do that. Now, they might be able to figure it out to do, but I don't know. That's the school district and the college, and that's really not our wheelhouse, but I agree. I mean, if there's a lot of places. One thing we just worked on with water, it seems like every year as county commissioners, we go to the legislature a lot. It seems like we're playing defense a lot. They passed, they had a lot of money this year, and they passed, it was HB 242, and it was a water, they wanted to meter secondary water. And that was really, and it's, you know, for the first and second class counties, which is Salt Lake and like Utah County, Weber, some of those counties are bigger, metering that water probably makes sense because it's clean water. It's coming out of Jordanelle or some of these reservoirs, it's pretty clean. But you take a little town like Parowan, and the water's dirty, or Cedar, we don't really have much of a secondary water system, but Parowan, for instance, does, and those meters will fail. And I think the estimate to meter all the secondary water in Parowan was $4 million. It's more than their whole budget. And those meters would have failed. So we worked really hard. Mayor Halderman, myself, and others went up to the legislature, and we kind of fought to get an exemption for these dirty water systems. So if the water metering company would not warranty that meter for so long, they were exempted. And so we got that done. It would have been devastating to those guys. So it seems like, and this bill has come up over and over again, so it seems like we're always working on that. But, any other water questions?
So we walk every morning and we noticed that there was this leak going on. Every time they watered, there was this leak going on from the apartments across from the high school. So when we see something like that, I mean, it just makes me sick to see all that water just.
Mm-hmm.
Is there somewhere that we can call? It needs to be fixed.
Was it a private residence?
It was the apartment complex across from Cedar High School.
Oh, the soccer fields to the east?
Cedar High School.
Oh,
And I don't know, it's winter.
I think the owner would appreciate a call. I don't know. I think the Levitts own those apartments.
Is that Levitt's?
Yeah, so call them.
Okay, so when we see things like that, it helped to have a main number or something that people could call.
Tyler, is there a number?
Those are John Dahl.
There isn't a number. We are working on a system that's like a non-emergency complaint system online for the city. I don't know if any of the other cities or counties or the county have that system. Anyway, we're working through that and just making sure there's no glitches, but that would be a good way to reach out. The other thing too is even if you have a leak, it's still cheap. And that's why we adjusted water rates for the top end users, right? So people who are using water conservatively, their water rates really aren't going up, but the ones who are using 2 or 3 times the water you would expect, their bills are going to go up significantly.
Good point, good question. So I want to go back to growth a little bit. So, you know, a lot of people say, shut off growth, we don't have enough water. But, and a lot of us that have maybe, I was a transplant here. I was transplanted in 1980, fell in love with, I don't know, how many have been here less than 5 years, right? I mean, you guys moved here because it was awesome, but it seems like a lot of people move here and then they say, shut it off. But, you know, and we can say that from, we think in our head that people from out of state are moving into Cedar City, but really the growth is our kids and grandkids. I want my kids and grandkids to live by me. I don't want to export my kids and grandkids. I want to figure out solutions so I can have my kids and grandkids in Cedar City, not have to move away, right? So.
I came from Vegas 5 months ago, and we are the driest place on the earth. And they do have people that come around to your neighborhood down there for the city, and they watch people's homes. Somebody reports a leak or something, they're on it, because our water problem down there is, it's crazy.
Well, and that's a good, I'll bring something up. So studies have been, you know, the pipeline to the West Desert Pine Valley is estimated to cost about $260 million. I think it's going to cost more than that with inflation and material costs. But the study that was done in our basin, when I was on the board, and Tyler could correct me, but I think it was about $45 a month increase in water. And that doesn't include any new growth, any impact fees or any of that. As we have new growth, it's going to lessen that burden. But I was talking to a friend of mine that was serving us at a SUU football game in California. I was down there watching a football game, and he was a mission president down there. And he said, Paul, you guys have no idea how cheap your water is. He said, I have, in our little mission home, we have a little bit of grass, a little home, and our water bill's $850 a month. And I'm not saying that's what ours should be. I'm just saying, in perspective, when we look at areas like Vegas, I don't know what was your water bill down in Vegas? Do you remember?
The water?
Yeah, what was your water bill a month?
It was pretty high.
Was it?
It was high.
But
Did a lot of laundry and stuff within the house, but I would never again plant grass.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Right.
Never. We had a big yard, and our water bill was like almost 200.
Well, we've taken out some of our grass, and we've also, there's a company that they come in and they treat your lawn for several years, and it's supposed to build the mulch better and hold the moisture better and use about half the water. Those are all things we should be looking
They
into.
have beautiful artificial stuff now. It looks real.
Right.
And
Mhm.
it uses no water.
Right.
And it's dog friendly.
Right.
Yeah.
The water from the sewage treatment plants, not familiar with the larger sewage treatment plants up north, but
Mhm.
even in other states. But sometimes they take that affluent water, what grade 2 water,
Yes, it's type 2 that comes out of the.
type 2
Mhm.
comes out, and that efficiently can be used. But also I walk with my wife, and I will walk down the Second South,
Mhm.
I guess, all the way
Sure.
out, and there's a big concrete box there that runs 24/7. And it's, you can hear the water running, and it goes across over to the senior place and runs right down into that city park there.
Yeah, that's the Southwest Field Irrigation
Yeah.
Company. And that's,
So-
yeah. And that goes down through town. You'll see water running down the curb and gutter.
Yes.
And for years, people have had rights to use that. They can divert it into their gardens and lawns and that.
So in terms of that water, that's irrigation water. Where does that come from, the aquifer?
That comes out of Coal Creek.
I got Cold
Mhm.
Creek.
There's a head gate up Coal Creek. Hi.
And knowing, had ever been looked at having those same rights like the people out in the desert use, they have that right to use the water for irrigating.
Mm-hmm.
But to build a dam somewhere in that process to reserve water and actually purify it, to regenerate it back into the drinking water and living water that they use in the home.
I know the mayor's talked about that. The city has purchased, I think the city, so in the old days, a lot of people owned rights to Southwest Field. They own shares. And I know the city, I think it's a majority shareholder now. I think they own about 60% of that water. So they have an option, yes, someday to look at those ideas. There, as far as dams in Iron County, there's not a good place to put a dam. We have looked for years. We're not like St. George where they got Quail Creek and Sand Hollow. They're just not. There is a good spot for a dam out north, kind of northeast of Fiddler's Canyon. Up in there's a place where you could dam it off, but where do you get the water to fill it? That's a problem, you know. So if you had water, it'd be a nice reservoir up there. But they've tried up the canyon. With the amount of residue or the amount of soil in the water when we have these big events, it just fills them up. You're dredging them yearly.
And my wife and I were walking the trail just north or south of our home,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a big green tank there, and that's city water. And we walked by there, and last year, well, 2 years we've been here, but I've never seen a trickle of water coming down there, and where it came from was apparently right out of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's an overflow.
Might be an
But it
overflow.
was running pretty heavily
Mhm.
by the time we came back.
Right.
And I thought, you know, there's always,
And that might be, and we rely on citizens, you know, they can't be there all the time. You know,
Yeah,
call the
well,
city
we
office,
saw-
say, hey, there's a tank up here leaking, and they might really appreciate that information.
well,
Robbie
we
Mitchell.
saw a truck that.
Oh, did you? Okay. Robbie Mitchell's our water director, and I'm sure they'd appreciate those calls because they can't be everywhere, so that's awesome.
The question doesn't have anything to do with water,
Sure.
but it's things that we're concerned about in our neighborhood. One is
Where do you live?
next to Jeff Lazar.
Oh, yes, okay. Up on Mesa Hills, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the things we've been discussing is election integrity here in Utah, which if you start looking at the numbers and things, they don't add up. I don't know if there's anything you can take up with the legislature to at least put some kind of audit or control over. The next one's coming out and everybody's talking about it, but there is no control. That's one thing. The other thing that is concerning is Cox announced that it's going to be taking, I don't know, X amount of Afghanis coming in, Afghani refugees.
Mhm.
I grew up in that part of the world, and I know what we're dealing with,
Mhm.
especially if they're not vetted. You know, everybody's talking, oh, poor this, poor that, but poor us.
Mm-hmm.
Up north, they already have a problem with the Somalis. And Afghans and Somalis do not mix. So they got to disperse these people somewhere. And I
Mhm.
don't know whether it's going to come here or not. Down south, I don't know if you've heard anything or there is anything you can do to stop this inflow because it's coming. They took $150 or $200 million to bring these people in. They're not going to be in Salt Lake.
I'm not aware of any that have, you know, that they've shipped down here. Election integrity, I think, you know, that's the county clerk. It's an elected position, and but we fund that department, and you know, I don't think we have an integrity problem here. I know that Phil Lyman over in San Juan, he's a representative. He ran a bill this year to go back the old way where you go and show your ID and you vote. And if you want a ballot, you can request an absentee ballot and have it sent to your home. I know it's a hot topic and it's a concern. I personally, during the Trump-Biden race, I was in Vegas measuring a cabinet job for my son, and my wife and I stayed an extra day. And you hear about election fraud, but you really don't. So this is what we did. They had kind of a team down there, and we had an app on our phone, and we'd go to a house where they sent an absentee ballot to that house. And if it was John Smith, and they kind of tracked people that had never voted in their life, but they requested an absentee ballot, and that ballot was sent to that house and returned filled out. And we went, Mary and I knocked on 10 doors that day, five doors answered of those kind of doors that were targeted. And all 5 of those homes said that person hasn't lived here for 2 or 3 years, every single one of them. So, and we filled out affidavits and sent them in. That was clear election fraud, right? I mean, there was a ballot sent, filled out and sent back, and that person didn't live there. So clearly, it wasn't sent there, somebody else filled it out. And so that was, you know, you read about these things and you wonder about it, but that was evidence to me that it happens, you know. I think Iron County does a good job. I know that there's 2 schools of thought. Some, you know, there's pros and cons. I mean, I like the old system. I liked it when I went in and showed my ID and voted. I like that system better. I know there can be room for fraud. My son is a property manager, and I know he has a big apartment building. And one year, I think it was 2 years ago, a kid, one of the students, there's 10 units per door. Behind the front door, there's 10 apartments in there. And one of the kids came up with a stack of ballots and said, "Here, these have been laying around." And that's not cool, right? And so, but on the other hand, when you get a ballot sent to your home, you have a lot of time to open that ballot, research the candidates. If there's initiatives or, what's the other word, initiatives or referendums or whatever on that ballot, you have time to look at it, research it. And I've been in politics for a long time. I can't tell you how many people have called me from the voting booth the old way and said, "Paul, who should I vote for?" I said, "I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'll tell you who I voted for and why, but I'm not going to tell you how to vote." And so there's some pros and cons, but I personally prefer the old system.
The problem is ERIC is basically the electronic registration system that Herbert was one of the founders. And
Right.
it's a black box somewhere that's coming up with the voter rolls. And as far as I know, some people within the legislature have tried to get access to this, and they've been blocked by the Secretary of State. Now, I don't know if this is something you can get involved with or not. This is really a question. It's that, and also these refugees that are coming in unvetted. They're not going to be up in Salt Lake. They're going to
Right,
resettle them
right,
somewhere here, especially with all the growth going on. So they need jobs too.
right.
So this is just one of those things that, I mean, I don't know if it's on your radar or not, or if there's anything you can do as county commissioner or not. I know with the education is another story, it's another person.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I'm not aware of any of those immigrants that are coming here. Could be. I'm not aware of them.
I come from big city. We moved
Right.
here 11 years ago because of all these issues
Mm-hmm.
that cities have.
Right, right,
And people brush under the thing, and then you open your mouth, you're racist. Not that I care what they call me, but
right, right,
here at least, for now, the kids are safe.
right. Okay.
Hey, Paul.
Well, thanks for the point. Yeah, Dan?
I had an opportunity to interview the sheriff recently.
Okay.
And talk about the jail, and that is within the county's purview. Could you tell us a little bit about the process that you've gone through with the jail, and kind of where we stand right now, and why we need the jail?
Sure. Yeah, the jail is a really emotional topic for a lot of people. It's not something, first of all, going way back, when I was running for office, I remember sitting in a county commission meeting, and the county commission at the time asked SU to do a study on where to put a jail. And I remember them coming, I think they came with 4 options. And as they vetted those options, not a single one of them worked. Because when you build a jail, you have to have infrastructure. You have to have water, sewer, fiber, gas. You have to have all the utilities. And when I first was elected, and so it's been talked about for a long time, Dan, and and I know that the county knows they need a jail. They've known that for a long time, because ours is the oldest jail in the state. It's about 35 years old. And they've been taking away money. Every year when we have excess funds, we put it into a savings account to build a jail. And we've got a fair amount saved up. But so they did that study. A lot of those sites didn't work out. When I was first elected, I like taking old buildings and remodeling them. I'm a cabinet maker. And so I do a lot of work for the schools in Sevier County. And I've seen them for years take these old elementary schools, instead of tearing them down, they bring them up to earthquake standards, current standards and code, and they remodel them and maybe add on to them, and they're beautiful. And they save the taxpayers millions of dollars. And so I'm a remodel guy. I like that. And so's Mayor Green. He told me the same thing. The challenge with our jail, and I thought, well, maybe we can remodel our jail. But when they first approved that jail out there, they did a conditional use permit that the city approved, and they won't let them build outside of that footprint. And so, and then the other thing is trying to remodel a jail with inmates in it is extremely difficult. I remember I was out there I installed the cabinets in that jail a year before the year I started my cabinet business in '87. That's how long ago that was. But I was out there a few years after that installing some more cabinets, and I remember carrying some tools. I had 2 armloads of tools with very sharp objects in the buckets. And the doors hurried and locked, and prisoners started milling out, and I thought, oh boy, this is it. And it was pretty frightening. But anyway, so it's difficult. And if we have to move those prisoners to another facility, we have to pay that facility. So it probably costs us $5 million to move those prisoners or inmates into another jail to remodel it. And then we've still got an old jail. It's still, the pipes, the problem with that jail is the pipes are rusting out in the ground. They'll run a snake down to undo a clog, and it'll go through the pipe into the ground. It's so rusty. We've got, that jail was built for 4 female inmates, and now we have 25 in that same space. And it's not working. So we desperately need, and I think most people know we need a new jail. I think most people are on that page. It's just been difficult. And then when I got elected, I thought, let's build it out to Iron Springs. We own land out there right across from Frank's Hotel. We've got a big piece of property where the animal shelter is. And, but we got looking at that, and there's no sewer system out there. We'd have to build sewer lagoons. That could take years to do those, get them approved. Frank was fine with it. Frank said, yeah, build it there. I'm fine with it. There's been some talk that there's some nefarious thing going on Frank cut a deal with us to get us to buy a piece of property out north of Love's so that he wouldn't have to, Frank was fine with building it out there. He was fine. But the issue is water. We'd have to run a water line up Iron Springs Road. We'd have to build a sewer system and other utilities. And the other thing that Sheriff Carpenter was mostly concerned about was the travel, because it's going to be the sheriff's office. So every day our sheriff's deputies are driving clear to Iron Springs and back every day. And it's a lot of wear and tear on tires, vehicles, gas, all those things. And so the sheriff convinced me that it wasn't feasible. So we started looking at sites closer to town. We found a site that was by Smead Manufacturing, just to the north of Smead, right there. There was a field there. And it was actually already zoned INM1, which means you can build a jail on it. All you would have to do is get a conditional use permit. And so we actually made an offer on that site. There was some people that were upset thinking we did it in secret, but when you're doing land negotiations, you don't want to announce to the world that you're going to buy this piece of property. Or it's like Walt Disney, right? He sent people kind of in to buy a whole bunch of pieces of property so people wouldn't buy it underneath you and jack the price up. So we actually made an offer on that site, but in our due diligence phase and talking to excavators, we found that the soil, first of all, it's very flat. There's hardly any drainage. It's in a floodplain. And it would require about 8 feet of over-X. We would have to remove the soil, compact it back, and then where it's low and in a floodplain, we'd have to build those paths. Anyway, long story short, it would cost too much money for that site for excavation. So we started looking around, and this was a site we hadn't looked at before, but the one out by the Auto Mall site, we've looked at a 40-acre piece out there. When people hear us talk about 40 acres, they kind of freak out. Oh, you're going to build a 40-acre jail? No, we've talked about moving it clear to the back of that 40 acres, just zoning the back 15 acres and then zoning the front commercial, so the commercial can fill in. We've toured a lot of jails in the state, and where we've toured those, there's been commercial and residential fill in around the jails. And so we have to have utilities. It has to be convenient. It has to be close to the hospital in case there's an emergency, so it doesn't take too long to get a prisoner there if they're hurt, or an inmate. I should call them inmates, I guess. And so there's a lot of factors in it. It's been a very difficult process. It's not one that's fun to go through because people are emotional. The site in, the jail, the current jail's been there 35 years, and we've never had a problem. It's safe. The newer jails are even safer. The technology and the things they're more efficient. They build a new model like a hub and spoke. So several guards can, there's no blind spots, so they can sit there and monitor a lot of inmates with fewer people, and they're efficient. We've toured the state and seen about 6 different jails, and it's a long process where we've got to acquire the land. So right now the county commission voted on that site north of I think it's about 3/4 of a mile north of Fiddler's Canyon. It's up close to the canyon. It's not very visible from the freeway. That was one concern, is people didn't want a jail right by the freeway. And I agree, we should save that property for retail and commercial space. So we moved to the back. We voted on that. It'll go to Tyler and the Planning Commission and the City Council, and they'll have to agree with us and change the zone, issue a conditional use permit, and then we can start the bidding process and moving through that. So.
I thought it was a done deal.
Well, it's a done deal with the county commissioner. We voted on it, but even after we do the conditional use and the zone change, there's still a due diligence period where we have to determine if the sewer's adequate that goes out to Enoch, if the pipes are big enough to handle the sewage, we got to go through that period to see if it's going to work, and if it doesn't, we'll have to, do something different. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to the meeting the county commissioner's meeting over there at Parowan when it was discussed. I went there initially opposed to it because I heard Automall Drive, and that's right up by the freeway. And, going on prime commercial property and all of that. And hearing all of the discussion, that really is the best site, and it is clear back. I went out and looked. It's clear back way off where they would
Thanks for coming.
never use it for stores or other commercial development, I don't think. But when I learned the facts, then I changed my mind on it.
Yeah.
And decided that really was the best place for it. But if you go and look at that site, it's tucked way back in where probably the when you see it, especially when trees and things grow up that they plan to put there.
The mayor was concerned about that site initially. The chamber director, was concerned. Our economic development director, and then a property owner out there was concerned about it. And I actually took each one of them out there and showed them, stood clear to the east side of that property, the fence, and all of them said, yeah, this will work. So now it'll go to city council. But and if you've signed in and leave your email, if you want to put a mark or write jail, I've got some links that I can email you if you'd like to watch them, for those that want to learn more about the jail and what the process. Well, I think we've got 3 meetings we've done that we've recorded, so I can email those to any of you you'd like, so, if you'd like to watch them. Any other questions on the jail? Dan, do you think I covered that okay? Or?
Wait, you didn't make this decision all by yourself?
No. The Sheriff Carpenter ran on this platform that we needed a new jail. We support our law enforcement, we support our sheriff. And once I was convinced that it wouldn't work to remodel and it wouldn't work out to Iron Springs, then we work with law enforcement, and that's their preferred choice. Is that here's something too. I talked to Danny Benson. He's in law enforcement up at Bryan Head, and he said, Paul, if we had to arrest somebody in Parowan or Bryan Head and drive them clear to Iron Springs, and back to our hometown, he said it would take so long. And a lot of these towns with law enforcement, it's hard to hire law enforcement right now. It's really difficult. And so he said our town would be, unprotected, and they would spend half a day doing that. They said we'd probably just let a lot of them go. And so it's really going to be better to have that central in Iron County where it's kind of in the middle. And so and another point, people are, and of course people are worried about people, escapees. I think our jail right now had one guy, there was a guy that was a low risk. I think he was out mowing the lawn and he walked off or something. They picked him up, brought him back. I think that's the only case we've had out to this other jail. And people say, well, how can you have that near a school? Well, that jail right now, it's been there for 35 years and it's got, 3 schools and I think 2 churches right by it. And so we haven't had a problem. And after they built it, the houses and businesses filled in around it. So I think you're going to find that it's, actually, I think on the north end, once you start turning dirt and running utilities and improving roads, I think it's going to spur growth. We're hoping the grocery store, we're hoping a grocery store moves. That's one of Garth Green, or Mayor Green's goals, is to get a business out there, some retail and some grocery stores to relieve the traffic and congestion on the south end of town. So.
I heard that one of the reasons which is difficult to find law enforcement today is because Cedar City or Iron County is not paying enough.
Well,
losing sheriffs that they
Well, and that's, so we were facing that last year, and we did a 10% increase for our law enforcement, and so Iron County was up here, right? We were right up there at the top, and with inflation and everything else, and then the state of Utah gave their Utah Highway Patrol an $8 an hour raise, so it went up here, and it's just going like this, and it is difficult. We're in a tough spot with inflation right now. We gave some of the biggest raises we have ever given in Iron County to our employees. We gave a 10% raise to our county attorneys. They hadn't had a raise for a long time, and the sheriff's department and correctional. And then we gave a 5% across the board. But we're definitely going to have to look at more with inflation. But it's with inflation, we've got to help our employees be able to live, and so we're very concerned about. I've made calls to our auditor, our HR person, say run the numbers, let's see what we can do this next year to put it in the budget. We're trying to cash flow this jail if we can, so we don't have to put it out to bond. And if we can cash flow it, we've had enough money, and we do fill it with county inmates, and then we backfill it with state and federal. And one of the concerns with state and federal people think, oh, these are really bad people. Those people, when they serve their time, they never get released in the city where they're serving. They're always bused back to the place where they were picked up. And so that's something that I think has helped people, feel a little better. But county people, those are our neighbors and residents, have made a mistake. They serve their time and then they're released. And hopefully we as a community welcome them back. Sometimes, and I shared a story in one of our meetings, sometimes people think that prisoners have a disease and we don't want them ever around us. These are people the good people that made mistakes, a lot of them. Yeah, there's some real bad people, but there's people that are good that made mistakes. And, it was about 4 years ago, I think it was about 4 years ago, when I was running the cabinet shop, I had an ex-con. He just barely got out of prison, out of California. He came in and applied for a job, and I was nervous, but he said, Paul, nobody will give me a chance. Nobody will give me a job. And I hired him, and he's with us, and he's one of the best employees we have. And he's so grateful that we gave him a chance because nobody else would. And these people, some of them just need a chance, and he's been awesome, and it's blessed us and him, so it's been good. So I think we just need to remember that.
You talked about the wages and other things going up, trying to keep up with inflation, but where do our first responders and teachers go? We've got all this growth going, so you're going to need a lot more of all of that. How are you going to afford a house?
I don't know.
On a wage. So I'm
it's
just
tough.
wondering, do they have anything for housing? I know in some of these rural, you go out to Whitehorse and they have housing that's possible for first responders or teachers or whoever goes out there.
So one thing
One
thing we did to try to help with this, and I know Councilman Mellings worked on this in the city, but we passed what's called an R4k Ordinance. And if you guys are driving down the freeway north, stop at the exit right there at KB and take that frontage road to the south and go down there and look at that little subdivision. I think it's about 80% owner occupied. There's a few rentals in there. They're small lots. They're 3,500 to 4,500 square foot lots. They're immaculate. Those people own them. They have pride in their properties, but they're smaller. They use less water because Tyler, how much water do they use compared? You did the study on that. How much water do they use compared to a house?
A Cedar City single-family home, they use about, I think it was right about 30% of the water. So, one of those homes is using, one single-family home, and Cedar is using 3 times the water.
Okay, and so we passed an ordinance called the R4K. So a developer can go in and develop some property. It has to be between 5 and 20 acres, and they can go in there and develop some smaller lots so they can put smaller homes on them. Our kids, and even law enforcement and others, they can't go from $0 to $500,000 for a home now. And so we need something in between where they can go to an in-between, build equity, sell it, and then move up. And so that's what we're trying to do. And another thing on that is we're looking at, I went and toured, there's a friend of mine named John Forsyth, and he's built some of these homes. They're really awesome. And they look like a normal home, but basically they stack cinder block, and a homeowner can do it. It's a lot of work, and it takes some knowledge, but they stack cinder block and put rebar every 2 feet, horizontal, vertical. They stack that block, they put some foam on the outside, they grout that solid, and it creates a thermal mass home to where, and then they do some windows on the south facing, so they have some solar benefits. And the one home that I toured, his, with that style, and it looks like a normal house when it's a beautiful home. It doesn't look any different, because they, basically on the inside, they don't even sheetrock the walls, they just perfotate the cinder block. And it looks awesome. And then the outside they stucco it or whatever on the foam, but I think his heating and power bill for the whole year last year was $86. So there's some ways to solve these problems. We got to think outside the box. We got to change some rules. One of the biggest things, so my platform has been protecting taxpayers, protecting our quality of life, stopping government overreach, and water infrastructure. That's my platform. That's what I will do going forward, and that's what I've done in the past. If you go back and look at my 10-year history as a city councilman or as a county commissioner, that's what I've done. And a lot of these things like the R4k, what Tyler did in the city council with some smaller, what was yours called, Tyler?
It's a neighborhood zone.
Neighborhood zone. And we've got to start thinking outside the box and thinking of new ways to handle these problems, because like you say, I don't know, it's pretty spooky to know our kids won't be able to afford a house unless we come up with some creative ideas.
So this growth is not bringing in enough revenue for increasing salaries and things like that?
Some, yes, and that's what we've got to look at that and see how much increase we have and what we can do. But we're definitely looking at it for this next year, yes. Any other questions? Mari?
What did you do, like during COVID? I know, there was a lot of things that you did, for the government overreach that happened from, state level and stuff. You want to talk about?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the question. So we push back pretty hard. I don't, myself and the other two commissioners, we don't really believe in mandates. We believe that your health is, excuse me. We took the attitude that your health is your responsibility. If you want to stay home, stay home. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But when it came to the mandates, which pushed back a little bit, as we went through COVID and they started shutting down businesses, they would deem certain people essential, right? They'd say, well, this is an essential worker. Well, in my book, everybody's essential because they're providing for them and their families. Everybody's essential. And so, but I remember one Sunday night, you guys remember when it sounded like, it almost reminded me that our country was under nuclear attack, but the sirens went off and Governor Herbert came on and he said, we're going to shut things down, but it's not going to hurt anybody. The next night, there was and I won't give names, but this was in, I think, early December that happened. And this woman called me that owned a restaurant, and she was in tears, and she said, I just lost 6 cancellations for Christmas parties at my restaurant. And that's $30,000. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my bills? I got on the phone with Rich Saunders, the state health director. I called him at 10:30 at night. And I asked him, I said, Rich, how are you going to pay this woman's rent this month? He didn't know. But these decisions by government bureaucrats to shut your business down, that's a problem I had, is when you have a bureaucrat that is taking a paycheck derived from the very businesses that they're shutting down, and they continue to draw a paycheck, but they prevent you from earning a living and feeding your family. We had a problem with that. And so we did push back. And so,
Paul, I know you won't toot your own horn, so I'll toot it for you a little bit. Paul put his money where his mouth is. He, through the Chamber of Commerce, he donated his commissioner's salary during shutdowns to local businesses to help them stay afloat.
it wasn't a lot, but it went, thank you. But it went to some restaurants. It wasn't a ton, but I think it helped some. But Edie?
I have to say, I really, really appreciated your attitude about that. I am 80 years old, and I have, unless I was required to, I've never worn a mask. I've never gotten sick. I've done everything I could to build my immune system. And yet my whole family in California were having to wear masks, having to work at home. I really appreciated that.
You know, I didn't really get on social media and say, I didn't bash the mask. I had an issue with my daughter. I talked about my Chinese daughter that has one arm. She plays a violin with a prosthetic, and I don't know. Her teacher kept harassing, I think bullying her, because during orchestra class in school, the mask would slide down over her nose, and she'd stop the whole class and embarrass her and say, Brooklyn, your mask is down below your nostrils. And this, if you ever tried to pull up a mask with a prosthetic, it's pretty tough. And so I got a little bit fired up, and we got an exemption from a doctor, and that was the end of the mask for her. So, but anyway, there was a daycare here locally that these daycares are sanctioned by the state of Utah, and they're subsidized so that if they take, so say there's a low-income woman that's a single mom, and she has these little kids, and she needs to go to work, she could take those kids to this daycare, and then she could go earn a living, right? And so it was awesome. And there was a daycare here in town, and she called me all really concerned because OSHA came into her daycare, and they were going to fine or shut her down because she wasn't forcing 2-year-olds to wear masks. And they were even outside in her backyard while they were playing on the swing set. And I went to war with them over that issue, and we won that. I mean, and the problem, and what they're finding is with these mandates, they've had a lot of these, and she did the same. She said, I'm done with you, state of Utah. I'm done with your regulations. I'm quitting. I'll just go private. And so the state lost so many daycares that were subsidized. It hurt. What it really hurt is those single moms or dads or whoever that were using that service so they could go earn a living. And it hurt them so bad, I think the state's now realized, what is it? They just passed a bill that, what is it, Tyler, you were telling me about?
They have to pass a bill basically saying cities and counties can't regulate local daycares anymore.
Right.
So if you have a state license, you're good because they're trying to get rid of hurdles. I believe that was 14.
Government overreach is a problem, and it has unintended consequences that I sit on the 5-county Board of Health. I work with 5 other counties, and my responsibility as a commissioner, I'm on the 5-county Board of Health, Behavioral Health, and the steering committee. And we organized. You have a question?
I do. Are you ready?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You talked about government overreach, and I appreciate your opinion there. How about government underreach? Let me explain.
Okay.
Do you represent the east side of Westview Drive?
The east side of Westview Drive?
Cross Hollow Hills.
Cross Hollow Hills.
We are in the county.
Unincorporated county. Mm-hmm.
And we had some real problems with the city wanting to put 100-foot wide, make Westview Drive 100-foot wide long, just like Freedom Boulevard. And we fought that for 4 years. And we had the city with us most of that time, but we had to deal with them because they told us, the city, that the county had just turned it over to them. So we were a section that were to be represented by the county, but we were not represented by the county. And there's a lot of people on that hill are very, very angry with the commission because they dropped the duty. Basically, they turned it over, from what we were told by the city, they turned it over to the city. And we had homes right next to Westview Drive, and if you expanded that 100 feet wide, you're going to be in front yards. And so we appealed to our government and found that we had none. And so we had to go with the city, and we worked with the city for 4 years and brought them along and finally encouraged them, and they accepted the encouragement to have an outside agency come in and look at all of the roads in the area and make, and evaluate it and give their recommendation. And they did. They spent a lot of time doing that, and they incorporated a lot of public support. I went to a lot of meetings with respect to that. And they concluded the 75 feet, just like the traffic committee had asked for 4 years ago for Westview Drive.
Were they going to add 2 lanes or as a turning lane, and what were they?
With 3 lanes.
3 lanes and 1 being a turning lane?
A turning lane. And the kid from the city council said that would be adequate.
Kit Wareham, the engineer, city engineer.
I'm sorry?
City engineer, Kit Wareham, city engineer.
I'm sorry?
So Kit Wareham, is that,
Yes.
yeah, he was a city engineer.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And so we thought we were good for that. And along come about 3 weeks ago, and the city council just overturned the whole thing and dumped the recommendation that they had paid for to be made. So the heel's on fire again, and very disappointed that the commission didn't represent us then. So we're going to go to the commission this Friday.
No, you're talking, are you guys doing that in the city? Because
The city updated the transportation master plan about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
I know when I was on the city council 4 years ago, we were going through that process and talking about it, but the county, I think the city handles that road.
But we're still the residents of the county.
Right.
And the county wouldn't listen to us.
But the city, I believe the city, it's a city road.
We didn't have a government. We had no government at that time. The city didn't really represent us because we're not city people within their boundaries at all. And the county didn't either. So now we're going to the county again, and we're hoping Friday to make a case to have them finally represent us, because it's our property that is up for perhaps eminent domain if they still go with this 100-foot thing, wide road through there. And we've gone the path, whatever was suggested to us. We've listened to everybody, we've talked nicely to everybody, and so we're going to go to the county. So my question to you is, will you at least listen to us?
We always
Now
listen. Are you talking about going to the city council or the county commission meeting?
County Commission.
Okay,
The city council upturned it, yes.
okay, all right.
What meeting is Friday?
So we don't have commission meeting on Friday, we have it on Mondays. What meeting are you, is it a planning commission
Well,
meeting?
let's see.
What?
I have in my notes that it's
Our next commission meeting's in
made
Parowan.
a mistake.
Our next commission meeting's in Parowan on Monday at 9 o'clock, so.
Okay, can we make our case at 9 o'clock in Parowan?
At 10 o'clock, so 9 o'clock we have reports from departments. At 10 o'clock we have our general meeting, and there's a time for public comment. You could come talk about it then, but if it's an issue that you feel pretty strong about, we can't engage as county, if it's not on the agenda, we can't engage. You can make your statement, but we can't really talk back unless our attorney gets after us if we do a lot of dialogue, because it needs to be on the agenda.
And we understand that.
And you can call and get it on the agenda.
Again, we've worked with the city and we understand the process. We just want a government that will listen to us and not just make rules. And then after we make our whole case and they hire somebody to come in and they said 75 feet was adequate.
If you called our clerk tomorrow, just Google on your phone, just hit Iron County Clerk, call the number, talk to John Whitaker, and ask him if he will add that to our agenda for the Monday meeting. And you guys can come talk about it. We always listen. We listen to everybody. You can get on the agenda and we can talk about it.
And, okay, what was his name again?
John Whitaker,
John.
Jon. And he's our county clerk, and he'll put that on. They have to notice the meeting Friday, so you'll need to do it before. The sooner the better.
The sooner the better. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because we want
Sure.
a government we can, and their city had no incentive to represent us. We're not the city.
We have some flooding issues out there on 800 South, down just west of the chapel there. We've got all the water from that whole neighborhood ends up down there, and it floods homes every year. And so we're trying to The road's kind of a dam, and we're trying to get it engineered right now. I think Platt's got the contract, and we're going to try to take 800 South down where Eric Halliday lives on that down by the lift station, and we're gonna take the road down and then back up, so the water has a way to get across the road, hit the ditch, and then go out to Wichita. So we're working on some of those issues out there for flooding. So.
Because on the west side of Westview is the city. On the east
Correct.
side of Westview
Is
we're
unincorporated.
county.
Right, right,
Always have been.
right. Yeah, come in. Love to hear your thoughts. So. We've been a long time. We've been an hour and a half. I don't know if you guys got any more questions, or I mean, we can talk after. There's some cookies, drinks. There's a sign if you'd like to take a sign. There's sure.
Yeah.
Would you support or not support the commissioners being added to make the commission 5 instead of 3?
I don't support that.
You want to explain why, Paul?
I will. Yeah, I see a lot of counties go to 5 commissioners. People say, well, you got 3 people running your county. Here's the problem with that, is when you, and this is my own opinion, you know, I mean, people can disagree with me, but the reason I don't like it is generally when you take 3 commissioners and make 5, most of the time, they're more, I do commission work full time. I sold my business so I could do this, and I do it full time. But with 5 commissioners, generally they'll take the amount of pay they pay a commissioner and they divide it by 5 instead of 3. And generally that's usually a position that's maybe not as engaged. And what they do is the first thing they do is they go hire a county manager. And they pay that county manager that $100,000 and a secretary and a car and an office. And this is my feeling and I saw it happen before, is the minute they hire a county manager, because they might not be doing as much as full time, and the county manager's running everything, one person, and when there's a decision to make, all 5 of those commissioners look to the county administrator and say, what should we do? And so instead of 3 commissioners running the county, you have 1 person running it. And that's my opinion. And I
support that opinion as you've explained it, because I've seen that in colleges too. You have a board of trustees, but you still have a president of the college, and they don't do their homework at all.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
the
Same.
president of the college invites them over for a barbecue every year. And
thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you.
thank you. You answered that.
And that's just, you know, I mean, that's how I feel. And I served on the city council for 8 years, and there was 5 of us. I like 3. I mean, it just seems like we make decisions a little quicker and move. But it's important you elect good people. I mean, you could have a disaster if you had 3 commissioners that are running the whole county, and you elect 3 commissioners that aren't doing a good job. Yeah, you can be in trouble. That's why elections are important. So.
Can I ask about a rumor that I've heard?
Yes.
I've heard that you want to shut down Iron Mine,
The Iron Mine.
and I'd just like to hear what you have to say
Sure.
about that.
Sure, I love the Iron Mine. I think it's awesome. I love Utah Iron. I don't know why they start rumors like these. It seems like they start a rumor at the drinking fountain and it goes through the whole county in about 10 minutes. But we've had some issues. We've had some tax disputes with some, and every year we have companies that are what they call centrally assessed. They're assessed by the state people. They determine, like, for instance, I think it's is it interstate or intrastate, I believe, where it crosses county lines, like Rocky Mountain Power, the Union Pacific Railroad. Anyway, a lot of those big companies fall into that category where they're not assessed by our assessors; they're assessed by state assessors. And there's been some up and downs in the steel markets and different challenges. And we have disputes all the time with tax stuff. And so we've had a little bit of a dispute with that, but we're going through that and working through it. But no, I don't want to shut down. And in fact, when I was on the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District, the iron mines wells went dry overnight. They just quit working, they quit pumping water. and they were going to lay off 100 jobs were going to go away. And I voted as a board member to supply them water so they could keep going. So we have supported the iron mine. We do support it. I think it's an awesome asset. But the thing with taxes, and I'll say this, is whether it's Rocky Mountain Power, Union Pacific, Utah Iron, we love those companies. We don't want them to pay a dime more than they're expected or owed, but we don't want them to pay a penny less either. Because if they pay a penny less or a lot of pennies less, that shifts to every one of us in this room. And so so sometimes there's some conflict, and sometimes rumors can get started. That's absolutely not true. I love the iron mine. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I had heard that, and I knew how, from past conversations, I had heard how you really want people to be in the workforce and you want to create jobs, and so I just wanted to hear your side.
Yep. I've been an entrepreneur all my life and ran a business, and I think it's any business we can have that pays well and takes care of our people, and there's a lot of, I have neighbors that work out there. Why would I want to shut it down? That's crazy. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. If you'd like to take a sign, I'd appreciate it. Treats.